Alright everyone, so we have the next part in Totally Not Mark's 100% blind Naruto review. This one is going to be covering the Sasuke versus Itachi fight and the Jiraiya versus Pain fight, and I absolutely love both of these fights. These are pivotal moments in the entire series, and they mark a important step in the journeys for both the characters of Naruto and Sasuke. Naruto losing his mentor, and Sasuke finally having the fight with his brother that Kishimoto has been building up for years, and just how well written that fight was. Definitely worth the wait. And when it comes to the Jiraiya versus Pain fight, one thing that is absolutely amazing about that is you got to see why Jiraiya was known as a legendary shinobi in the Naruto universe, all the abilities that he displayed in that fight, as well as definitely showing you why Pain is a threat. Because even before we got into the fight, when Jiraiya infiltrated the Hidden Rain village, and then he talks to the actual people there and how they talk about Pain like he's this godlike figure, and how he was able to take out what was his name, Hanzo, Hanzo the Salamander. And then you find out, of course, that he's got the Rinnegan, and there in that fight you see why the Rinnegan is deemed as a legendary dojutsu in the Naruto universe, and why so many people believe it to be just a myth. Because when you actually explain to someone what the Rinnegan can do, it does sound like something so far-fetched that it's hard to believe that something like that actually does exist for real. And that fight definitely showed you why Pain is definitely not someone to be trifled with. So let's go ahead and watch this video, guys. But before we do, as always, I do have to ask you that if you want to show your support for the channel, remember to leave a like, share this video out there. Please hit the subscribe button if you're new. Make sure to click on the bell icon to be notified whenever I post a new video. YouTube is still, for some reason, they still haven't fixed the notification system. I don't know what the hell's going on there. And please comment down below with your thoughts on what we saw here in this video. And if you have any recommendations, let me know about them there, and I will get to them. And make sure to check the description for links, just like with every one of my videos. So let's go ahead and watch this video.
This video is sponsored by Zen Market. What is good, everybody? It's been a hot second since I covered Naruto after I took a break to cover Spider-Man and, well... yeah, let's just say that I had a bad month.
Yeah, we don't need to rehash those things.
I'm interested in moving forward and...
But if you're wondering why it took me a while to get to the reactions to Totally Not Mark's videos, because right as I was about to react to them, and I can't remember if I already told you guys this, let me know, but I was about to start reacting to his content, but then that whole thing happened, so I thought, just out of respect to him, I thought maybe I should wait. And that's why it took a while, if you just in case you were wondering.
Finally getting back to this Naruto review with one of the most feverishly awaited arcs I've yet covered. I didn't realize that when I took a break from Naruto, it was right before one of the most pivotal and beloved parts of the series. Okay, well, I had some idea, but certainly not to this extent. Today, I will be reviewing, breaking down, and sharing my appreciation for 3 sections of this tale. I will be tackling each one individually, starting with the Itachi pursuit mission, moving on to the tale of Jiraiya the Gallant, and culminating with the fated battle between brothers. Buckle in, because this is gonna be a fun one. So
okay, yeah, you guys know the drill. Even if it's a cover, although I will say this is still, in my opinion, the best opening in all of Naruto. Like, no other opening has been able to top this, whether it's you're talking animation, just the song itself, everything, just perfection.
Itachi pursuit mission, I want to announce something fun. I've just finished up my reviews for every live-action Spider-Man film, where I dedicated each video to one of the 3 main actors who donned the mask over the last 20 years, Toby, Andrew, and Tom respectively. And I had so much fun, I wanted to see if I could do something similar to that again, but with a little twist. The new Batman movie, entitled The Batman, starring Robert Pattinson, is slated for release in the first week of March 2022. And fun fact, outside of the dark...
So Sorry, before you continue with the video, I'm curious. Let me know your guys' thoughts on the Batman, because I did do a review. Um, and I was going to do a spoiler review, but it kind of got away from me. But I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on the Batman, just to get a good idea to whether or not you guys, whether you liked the movie, hated it, or if you thought it was just okay. And I think I remember hearing that there's either going to be 3 movies or 2. Like there's going to be a sequel. Just curious. Let me know your thoughts on the Batman in the comments.
And fun fact, outside of the Dark Knight movie, Batman vs Superman, sort of, and I guess Joker, I'm not familiar with the character at all. So I was thinking, what if I reviewed every live-action Batman movie from the 1966 Adam West incarnation of the character all the way to the modern great bat flick of the Justice League, which I also haven't seen. I will begin this 2-part semi-blind review series on February 19th, 2022. And in preparation for this, I'll be reading up on the original comics as well as reading some of the very best stories before I jump into this mostly blind review of the Batman films in an effort to figure out who was the best Batman ever and what was the best Batman movie in my opinion. This should be
my favorite's the Christian Bale Batman.
The Itachi Pursuit Mission. That was the first sentence of this arc. And with it commences a brilliantly twisting and turning set of stories, filled with incredible battles, definitely the best in the series I think, all centered around 2 characters and their fated conflicts. Sasuke's pursuit of his brother, Itachi. There's a lot to cover in this video. I haven't covered Naruto since before the holidays, and I think this was my most enjoyable experience when reading the material so far. Whether that has more to do with my heart growing fonder from absence, or whether it's the contents of these 3 incredible arcs telling of the story, I'll leave it up to you to judge. In an effort, however, to make sure this video doesn't last a million years, I'll be dividing this video into 3 natural sections. The first, the Itachi Pursuit Mission. The second, Tale of Jiraiya the Gallant. And of course, finishing with the fated battle between brothers. Each of these will have their own metaphorical and thematic strings I hope I pick up, and each has their battles. Holy hell, do they have their battles. But one thing I hope won't be lost here is that while I am dividing this video into 3 sections, I want to communicate that this story does a seamless job of perfectly and naturally connecting each and every arc together, implementing the words and teachings of previous arcs to bolster and in many cases greatly enhance the power of certain key moments. And the first sentence of this arc is no different. So long as you have mercy, you can't best Itachi. This is a poisonous mentality that clearly speaks to the corruption that dwells deep within Sasuke's would-be kidnapper, Orochimaru. However, this arc takes a twist very early on that I did not see coming.
Yeah. When he turned on Orochimaru.
This is an interesting fight to kick things off with, and honestly, it's not because it's competitive. In fact, it's not competitive at all. But what it does show us is that there's an air of, narcissism or perhaps ego attached to Sasuke now. Sasuke has nothing left to gain from Orochimaru, and so he absorbs him. Which is, I guess, fair and still self-preservation. Outwardly, however,
he was gonna do it to him, so it's only fair he, turned the tables on him.
Carries with him a quiet confidence with everyone around. And you can hear this in how he speaks to Orochimaru and the people he recruits afterwards into his 4-man cell group. But one thing that led me to suspect that there was still so much more to Sasuke than he was letting on was his dedication to, at numerous points in this story, to spare various individuals' lives if he could help it. Which again, flies in the face of what Orochimaru told him in this arc's opening line, citing that he needs to strip himself of mercy. But anyway, a large portion of this first section is dedicated to setting up these chess pieces.
So I just want to talk about this moment real quick. I just, recently I've been rereading some of my favorite moments in the Naruto manga, and I was rereading the, this part right here where Sasuke, after he kills Orochimaru and then he's going around recruiting all the members of Hebi, later to be renamed Taka. When he got to this moment where they made it to the Land of Waves and Sasuke standing in front of the the Great Naruto Bridge in the manga, and I still don't know why they changed this, because I feel like you kind of like lose some some context or a little bit of information that Kishimoto's trying to relate to us, the readers, is that in the manga when Sasuke was looking at, when it cuts to him, the shot is like taken directly from a panel in the chapter. I can't remember which chapter it is. It's kind of escaping me at the moment. But in the manga, he was smiling, like he had like a nostalgic smile on his face. And then later, once we get to ask him like what's going on, and then he immediately goes back to looking like this. But if you look at the anime, like they didn't include that. Like he just has this, just has this look on his face, and I don't understand why they did that, because in the manga, when you saw that, it showed you that even though Sasuke left, there's still a part of him that is still fond of those memories that he had in the past, and it makes him eventually, get to where he was after he kills Itachi and during the Five Kage Summit. It shows you just how much he's fallen and just how much his hatred has taken him, to the point where now it's like, Naruto, Sakura, Kakashi, like it doesn't matter. You stand in my way, I am gonna kill you. And I feel like you kind of lose that because the anime didn't include that. And I don't understand why they did this. I don't understand the change, because it was completely unnecessary. And this is, again, one of the reasons why I will always tell someone to please read the manga, because you'll be surprised just how much the anime actually changes things.
That he needs to strip himself of mercy. But anyway, a large portion of this first section is dedicated to setting up these chess pieces in this metaphorical chess game. Whether that be taken from a combat strategy sense, with Sasuke recruiting the likes of Suigetsu, Karin, and Jugo, Karin introducing her first seems to be the least complicated right off the bat. She offers a useful set of senses and skills for Sasuke's team, but for the most part, her contributions serve support and comedic purposes mostly, with her admiration of Sasuke and his sweaty, grubby clothes, making for a character that teeters the line between gross and funny. Jugo, on the other hand, is sort of the Hulk to Sasuke's Black Widow. He's got this intense desire to kill that he's overcome by from time to time. However, Sasuke seems to be able to grant this man the freedom from his mind that he's yearned for what seems like a long, long time. And if introductions were anything to go by, I'd say that he's even more simple than Karin. Which brings us to my favorite of the members recruited, Suigetsu. Outside of me really enjoying his design, there's such a weird, confident, and almost chaotic nature to how this person conducts himself around both Sasuke and others. Furthermore, on this chessboard, Naruto and the rest of the protag shinobi ready themselves for this pursuit. They recognize that Sasuke is after Itachi, and so they pursue Itachi, also in the hopes of finding Sasuke first. Oh, and in classic shonen fashion, the hero is told that their most powerful technique is too risky to use, which means he will definitely use this move, and it is gonna be awesome when he eventually uses it. And so now with Sasuke and Naruto,
that happens, of course, during the Pain Invasion arc.
This chase. And what better way than with one of the most surprisingly brilliant fights I've enjoyed in this series. Deidara versus Sasuke. This fight totally took me by surprise, grabbed my attention, and never let go. To tell you the truth, I enjoyed Deidara as a character in the past, but I never really connected to them until this fight, where the full scope of Sasuke's power can be observed and where the unbridled creativity of Deidara can change the tide of a given conflict at a moment's notice. And this is a quick aside, this fight is split between 2 volumes, and the only reason I mention this is because volume 40 has the best cover art I've seen from Kishimoto to date. Hands down, no contest. There's such a wonderful sense of kinetic energy to its line art, which is fitting because this fight is the exact same. Though when reading the manga variation of this fight, what I appreciated the most was the borderline absurd level of near misses, fakeouts, and swerves, with more twists and turns than a curly fry. As often is the case with these substantial fights, we receive the backstory and some new information concerning Deidara. We learn a little bit more about his motivations, and oddly enough, it turns out that this fight has a bit more weight to it now, with these 2 combatants yearning to surpass the same person, Itachi. Furthermore, and I feel this is worth saying at this time, when I sit down to digest these volumes of manga, I do so while taking notes for my script. Notes where I expand upon an impression I'm getting, or perhaps jot down a few useful talking points or ideas for the video. I try to be as eloquent as I can in order to effectively convey the emotion or technique at play in the story for myself later. But when Deidara used his best move on Sasuke, this is what my notes were. Deidara's fucking disintegrated Sasuke! Ah! No, seriously, my script actually says and also this sentence. But back to the fight. It appears that in order to survive that attack, Sasuke used the Sharingan to see the attack coming and dodge. He blindsides Deidara, but wait! Deidara is playing 4D chess and boom! Literally. Sasuke does reverse the situation again for the second time, but they changed this one up and tied it back to the beginning of the fight, while also adding the types chart into the mix, which was explored and introduced in the previous section of the story.
And this is, yeah, I think he's about to mention it, but this is one thing that I did love about this fight, is that Kishimoto earlier during the Akatsuki suppression arc, of course, brought up about the first of all, brought up the concept of the changes in chakra nature, which he actually hinted all the way back at the beginning of the series, where Sasuke performed the the fire style jutsu, and then he later on picks it back up in the Akatsuki suppression arc when he was training Naruto, and then Yamato tells him about the all 5 changes in chakra nature, which is fire, wind, water, earth, and lightning, and how each of them can either complement each other or just be a complete opposite to the or the thing that completely takes it out, like how fire can, if I remember correctly, fire takes out earth, water takes out fire, or no, sorry, it's been a while. I think it's fire. Yeah, fire works best against earth. Lightning works best against, and then earth works best against wind, and then lightning works best against earth. Although there's fire and lightning, so that's I forgot the relationship between the two. But he also brought up in the previous video how Naruto, when he saw that, immediately all he thought was like, my wind can complement Sasuke's fire. And we actually end up seeing that in the Fourth Great Shinobi War, when Naruto threw that Rasen Shuriken, and then Sasuke threw that Inferno style Susanoo flame control, and he fired that arrow, and then both of them combined, and then it turned into that new jutsu that could have burned down the 10 tails if he didn't split off that part of him. And I always love that he, again, like Kishimoto, in my opinion, is a master of setup and payoff. He's a complete master of that. And yeah, we do see that here. And I think that this is, for me, like when you look at the fight between, and you could say that he also kind of foreshadowed this, like when you see the fight between Deidara and Gaara, and then Deidara and Sasuke here, like both of them used kind of like an earth style ability, Gaara with his sand and then Deidara with his clay. And because they were both using the same nature type, it just came down to who used it better. And Deidara, of course, when Gaara covered his arm with sand, he was using his sand coffin ability, which we saw him use against Lee. And while he did take out, sorry, got confused there for a second. Where was I? Oh yeah, while he did take out Deidara's arms, before he did that, he mixed, or he used Gaara's sand to create more of his clay, and then created those little bombs inside of the sand shell that Gaara used, where actually it turns out it was all part of his plan, where he drops that bomb, and then Gaara uses most of his sand to shield it, which, as we know, used up a lot of his chakra. And then he throws one to Gaara, and then Gaara puts his sand shield around him. But it turns out that was all, again, a part of his plan. And because he already hid those things inside them, and it blew up in his face, and it completely took him out. But here, it was a lot difficult because Sasuke had an ability that was the complete opposite and can neutralize his clay. So you could say that Deidara lost because A, Sasuke was probably the better strategist, and was just the smarter fighter, and B, he went up against someone who was like his natural opposite. So Deidara was pretty much like he was facing pretty much an uphill battle, and then even then he still forced Sasuke to do something kind of drastic, just to survive.
Chidori was favorable against Deidara's style of jutsu, and he knew it from the start, but Deidara still had one last trick up his sleeve. This fight was honestly full of ups and downs, twists and turns, interesting reveals, and callbacks.
Which, sorry, I forgot to mention it, but it's kind of one of the reasons why I didn't really like how Deidara was handled in the Fourth Great Shinobi War when he was reanimated, because they kind of made him look weak, and I don't understand why he did that, because he, like, in all of his fights, whether it's versus Gaara, versus Naruto and Kakashi, and then later on in Sasuke, he showed him to be such an intelligent fighter, and then in the war arc he just kind of was I mean, he didn't really do anything.
To previously established techniques that made perfect sense for the time. And the way this fight ends creates the best outcome for both Deidara and Sasuke. Deidara puts some respect on his name in the eyes of everyone, including us, the audience, not just by how creative he was in his application of this incredible power, but also because of what Sasuke did in response to this attack to protect himself, summoning Orochimaru's giant snake to sacrifice and ultimately protect himself against the oncoming nuke. In other words, Sasuke appeared level-headed and incredibly resourceful, all the while Deidara, despite losing, unleashed one of, if not the most powerful attack we've yet seen in this series.
It's pretty much on the same level as a fucking Biju blast. I mean, Jesus.
Next level great.
Also, it looked a lot bigger in the manga.
Okay, so cards on the table. I knew about this character before I started reading. Or really, I should say, I knew what he looked like. But apparently, I knew less than I anticipated because I honestly thought that this was just some weird power-up for Naruto. Similar to Sasuke's one, but apparently he's just some new character called Pain. I feel incredibly dumb right now. There's a wonderfully heartfelt parting conversation between Jiraiya and Tsunade right here. And while he never explicitly says anything to Tsunade about him going on a mission with a low success rate, he knows that this is an important thing for him to do, not just as a high-ranking and skilled shinobi, but also as a mentor to the next generation. Upon finishing this arc, this was the scene that stood out to me as particularly attention-grabbing. He wanted a chance to have a drink with her and told her how he respected her. There was a specific focus on his most wonderful qualities with a sense of, melancholy hanging in the air, despite Tsunade saying that he is to return. Regardless, once I reached the end of this arc with Sasuke standing face to face with Itachi, I felt a very uneasy feeling for the future of Jiraiya as he arrived at the location of pain. Before we continue, I want to introduce you guys to something really cool. As you know, we really love to look at the ins and outs of anime production on this channel, but did you know you can actually pick up authentic artwork used in the making of some of your favorite shows? Thanks to Zen Market, you have access to Japan-exclusive sites like Yahoo Auction that feature a wealth of production materials such as character model sheets, keyframes, and the actual animation cells photographed for the shows. Zen Market will purchase the items for you and ship them directly to your door, and unlike other proxy services, they have a flat rate handling fee of only $3. This means no surprise charges, with your only additional costs being shipping. What's great is that they'll let you gather up items in their warehouse and ship them all at once, so you only have to pay for postage once, even across multiple stores. And if you're not interested in production material, there's also a wealth of exclusive figures that are often significantly cheaper than what you would find on Western sites. Anything you can think of, if it's sold in Japan, you buy it. Zen Market makes all this possible and delivers worldwide. So if you're in the market for some awesome Japanese rarities, then click the link in the description or pinned comment and see what cool stuff you can find.
Oh, there you go. Go to Zen Market.
As the title of this arc might give away, this is indeed the tale of Jiraiya the Gallant.
You don't say!
As such, despite there being some developments for the likes of Sasuke and Naruto respectively, while I will mention those characters briefly, I do want to focus my attention on this incredible story surrounding Jiraiya's attempt to gain intel on the Akatsuki and the nature of an individual called Pain. Following some light interrogation, we catch up with the likes of Jiraiya as he arrives on the shores of this Rain Village. We learn some backstory concerning Pain. He is apparently the reason why the Rain Village is so successfully closed off from everywhere. Pain defeated Hanzo, the man who named Jiraiya, as well as Tsunade and Orochimaru, the three great shinobi of Konoha. He coined that term. And in addition to killing him, Pain also killed his family and everyone who knew him. And all of this is coming from the mouths of the people. And to be honest, he sounds like more of a legend than an actual person, a god, a force of nature. And more on that in just a sec. The fight that ensues in this arc is different. And I mean that in a good way. While there's action of a unique variety, particularly with regards to Jiraiya and what he brings to the table, there's something more grand and prophetic about this occasion. It's less about the action and more about the mystery as well as the internal story of Jiraiya, as he fights against increasingly insurmountable odds, with perhaps the first clue concerning his thoughts on the future on the island coming by way of this gesture, lending the key that unlocks Naruto's full nine-tailed fox spirit to a messenger to deliver to Naruto himself. Nagato, Konan, and Yahiko were all children Jiraiya knew that were orphaned by the war of the time, but Jiraiya decided to mentor them. However, now that they seem to be associates of pain, and while it's a rather on-the-nose metaphor, the three of them have effectively embraced and focused on their pain rather than the good that they can do for the world, and want to instead enact their revenge, to make the world feel the same pain that they were forced to feel. And pain is a word that is thrown around a ton in this arc, and it's quite obvious that it's trying to draw a connection between the pain character and the very concept of pain with what it represents to these children. Nagato wants to give every nation the power to destroy each other so that they can all know pain. But what I love about this is what Jiraiya offers as advice and mentorship to these young, talented, and brave children. Instead of focusing on how the pain is manifesting, he points out to them that those that have gone through pain can understand it better than anyone. That they have the capacity to feel compassion on a greater level than anyone without that perspective or experience.
Yeah, because
that was such a wonderful way of thinking about this particular scenario.
Yeah, it's because they, because they know firsthand what war can do to a person, or maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be war, but just anyone who's had someone that they care about taken away from them. Again, whether it's through a war or I don't know, maybe because they just had, bad luck and they just ran into someone who was maybe also not really having a good day and just did something stupid, and it just causes them to just hate everything. Like it causes them to start to view the world not in the same way that they used to. Like before, the world was, you understood that bad things happen, but until it like directly happens to you, it's not really like, you don't really understand what someone else is kind of going through. And again, it goes back to it all goes back to what Sasuke was saying to Naruto at the end of part 1 during their fight, where he tells him, it's like, look, you don't know what it is I'm going through. And again, like I know a lot of people look at Sasuke and say that he was being like a little irrational at the time, but I don't necessarily think so. I've never really agreed with that, because what Sasuke said was absolutely 100% correct, because Naruto didn't know what Sasuke was going through. Yes, he knew how much it hurt, like Sasuke to be sort of, isolated and alone. But at the same time, he doesn't know how it feels to have someone that you care about ripped away from you, and in such a brutal way. And then the person who did it literally shows you what happened. He literally shows you the people that you care about being slaughtered right in front of you, and it happens at the hands of someone that you cared about, that you looked up to. Like, no, Naruto doesn't know what that feels like. Now, interestingly enough, he may know now because of what happened in the Boruto manga. Now, I won't say what happened, just in case someone's watching this who hasn't read the manga, but something did happen where Naruto might have now, after all this time, a good idea as to what it is he was going through all this time. And it just, like, again, this is something that Kishimoto I think does really well, where he strings these themes all throughout the story. And then when you look at something like the Tale of Jiraiya, the Gallant, the Jiraiya versus Pain, and you realize that it still connects to something that he wrote, an arc that he wrote a while back. And it's just like, this is something that Kishimoto does just really, really well. And I don't think enough people give him credit for that.
The battle with Nagato, or who Jiraiya perceives as Nagato, seems interesting, but more so, we see Nagato split up into 3 individuals that represent pain. The fight is interesting, told from Jiraiya's point of view, which aids in the climax, and interspliced in this fight are a series of flashbacks, and one such flashback is called back to once the 3 are taken down, and a surprise 4th person shows up, only 2. What was once 3 has now turned into 6 opponents. One being the Pain character himself that I recognized. Apparently Ahiko was said to have died, but I guess that's a metaphorical death considering he's here too? And upon closer inspection, Nagato doesn't look to be among them after all, though his eyes seem to be donned by everyone. What is happening here? Back with the likes of Sasuke and co, once they arrive at the location to meet Itachi, Kisame is waiting for them. Apparently only Sasuke is allowed to pass and speak to his brother, but not much else happens here for me to give my full opinion on just yet, considering this arc is primarily centering around Jiraiya and his current struggle. He discovers that the folks he's fighting are all faces from his past, perhaps signifying his failures standing right before him. And now, with it being 6-on-1, Jiraiya's reflection at the end of this section is perhaps the most poetic and beautiful section of this sprawling story. He spoke earlier in this tale with Tsunade, and I knew given the nature of his musings it would bear some relevance to this instance. In that section, he says, "Rejection makes me stronger. The pursuit of happiness isn't for us." In that scene, he speaks with a very tongue-in-cheek flair. However, it really speaks to the tragedy he sees as his life story. A shinobi's life is not measured by how they lived, but by what they managed to accomplish before their death. And in reflecting on that very principle, he clearly holds dearly during this short flashback. Jiraiya is haunted by the failings that he thinks defined his life until Minato cuts him off and instead praises his self-insert character's work. It's a book that he's reading, sort of like an autobiography of his life with a renamed character. It makes one wonder more about his decision not to accept the position of Hokage. Since he truly feels so ashamed of what he's done throughout his life, he probably thought he would fail in that effort too, in becoming Hokage. But the message Minato takes from this isn't that of his failings, but his tenacity. So much so, it's inspired him to name his son after the lead character of this book of his.
Naruto. 素敵な名前です。
This single turn of the page revealing the origin of Naruto's namesake had me fighting back tears.
And I think, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think that this is like, if I remember correctly, this is the first time we ever see Naruto's mom. This is the first time we ever see Kushina, and it's literally telling Jiraiya that he gave like the perfect name for their child, and then of course go on to name him the Godfather. And yeah, this is just everything about this absolutely well done by Kishimoto. And I do just want to point to something right here real quick. And again, like this should tell you that Kishimoto is really good at foreshadowing, because you have here like Jiraiya walking off, and of course you've got the sunset. Now don't get me wrong, this is by no means subtle. Like he wasn't really being subtle here. But yeah, just this again, the staging, absolutely beautiful. Him walking into the sunset, and then like Tsunade, like someone who's probably the closest to him. Like I think she, like a part of her knew that he wasn't coming back. And okay, so yeah, back to where we were.
So ashamed of what he's done throughout his life, he probably thought he would fail in that effort too, in becoming Hokage. But the message Minato takes from this isn't that of his failings, but his tenacity. So much so, it's inspired him to name his son after the lead character of this book of his.
Naruto. 素敵な名前です。
This single turn of the page revealing the origin of Naruto's namesake had me fighting back tears. And for me, this has been the most powerful and emotional moment so far. It's not even close. Executed to near perfection, discovering in his final moments that his real selection all this time was whether or not he would choose to fight one last time. To select Naruto to carry on long after he's gone, Jiraiya was once told as a child by the great elder that he would have a disciple that would change the world, potentially for good and potentially for bad. It depends on a choice. And in this instance, Jiraiya once again rallies himself after falling in order to try once again. And in doing so, imparts a crucial message for Naruto as to the identity of who pain really is. And as if like poetry, as Naruto falls to the ground in battle and Jiraiya fades into the ocean declaring that his next story should be called Uzumaki Naruto, Naruto rises from the surface below, ready to carry on his master's will. This story was stunningly depicted. The fated battle between brothers. The vast majority of this section or arc of the story centers around the brewing, or should I say, impending conflict between Sasuke and the brother he's wished was dead since that fateful day. In many ways, this arc acts as a culmination of Sasuke's journey, or at the very least, a pivotal or immeasurably important turning point in the young character's life. I found it interesting how the fight between Itachi and Sasuke begins with close quarters combat using a variety of weapons and blades. With all the sign weaving in the fights leading up to now, it not only gives it a sense of identity, but also a much more grounded, honest, and personal quality, lending all the more weight and, frankly, to my surprise, when... yeah, it's not him. Just like all those times in the past, Itachi seems to be one step ahead of Sasuke, and anyone else really. This close quarters, intimate and earnest affair seems to be nothing more than an illusion of an honest contest for Itachi. Okay, you gotta stop doing that. Alright, I love this small exchange as it works wonderfully from an audience's perspective. We begin this chapter expecting to deal with the contest between these two, but instead it acts as the stage for a series of illusions, both of which manage to work effectively on me.
Again, like this is one of the reasons why I love this fight, because I always love when writers have a fight between two characters and you see them perfectly utilizing their abilities. And because the Sharingan is known for its not only just being able to analyze and replicate other abilities, excluding Kekkei Genkai, of course, but its ability to create, or its ability to cast Genjutsu, and seeing as Itachi is like shown throughout the series being a Genjutsu master. But now Sasuke's showing that no, his Genjutsu has gone to the level where he can actually compete with someone like Itachi. And it goes back to what Obito said, who at the time, telling himself, going around calling himself Madara. He says that, Sasuke's eyes will eventually surpass even Itachi's, which is like we're seeing a bit of foreshadowing for that here in this fight, where his Genjutsu can now compete with Itachi.
Felt, at least for me, a little more for exposition than it did for character growth or revelation necessarily. Having come all this way after seeing so many spectacular battles, it doesn't seem like the fight is in any rush to meet its resolution, and I like that. It's interesting for sure getting to see Sasuke finally confront his older brother, but in retrospect, the entire affair felt very detached from reality, both literally and figuratively. Some information was divulged concerning the character of Uchiha Madara, who too possesses the Mangekyo, and in fact was the first one to achieve such. But I think the most interesting part of this conversation, and indeed conflict...
Well, now I think that's been retconned. Turns out that's not true.
The Mangekyo is a formidable weapon of ocular ability that affords the wielder a number of strengths otherwise not afforded to a standard Sharingan user. However, when Madara first possessed it, he noticed that there was a major drawback to it, that the more he used it, the more he lost his ability to see, which would be, for a ninja, less than optimal. In despair, Madara learned something vital. It was that if he took his brother's eyes, not only would he see the light return to his vision, but he would retain Mangekyo for forever more. This, for me, at the time, explained the sudden shift in how Itachi treated him growing up, why he felt like a good brother from time to time. He was simply working in his own self-interest. He wanted Sasuke to stay alive as a host for his future eyes. And honestly, this is an interesting angle to take this plotline down. It clears up a ton with regards to the mystery concerning Itachi, and while it takes away a lot of his mystique, it replaces it with a whole other brand of murderous, power-driven insanity, which, as Sasuke finds out, is terrifying on a whole other level. But this time, it seems Sasuke is significantly more skilled with the Sharingan than Itachi is with the Mangekyo eyes. And so, I guess it's round 2. The fight itself turned out to be a lot more competitive than I was anticipating.
Sorry, it's interesting hearing him say that, considering knowing what, happens in the future.
Naturally, I wasn't aware of the direction this fight would take and where things would go from here, but once Itachi revealed his hand, I figured some sort of resolution would be met at this point. And the visuals are stunning. In the manga, I particularly like the Amaterasu technique, or I guess the black flames that engulf Sasuke as he overpowers Itachi's fire efforts, forcing Itachi to dodge as the fire blast surges into the sky above. And once again, like most of the fights in this series, there's always an underlying strategy at play. And with the vision of Itachi waning and the chakra of Sasuke at its limit, something comes to the attention of Itachi. It turns out all of the fire Sasuke sent flying into the air wasn't for nothing, but in fact carefully calculated, creating for him an electrical cloud producing more energy than anything he could conjure up on his own. And what a strike this one takes! Traveling at 1/1000th of a second with enough punch to shake a continent. And it's at this point I think back to the kid I first met towards the beginning of the story and how far this festering hatred and desire for revenge has brought him, gifting him control over the very heavens themselves. It's a stunning display of power greater than anything I've seen once again. However, that's not how this fight ends. Revealing to all of us that he has had this trump card still up his sleeve, cornered and feeling like he's out of options, Sasuke is confronted by the very same sentence that this arc and video started with, uttered by Orochimaru. So long as you have mercy, you can't best Itachi. It can be seen throughout Sasuke's action in the material covered since those words were uttered that he has indeed shown mercy in almost every confrontation along the path to his brother, even to those trying to kill him, and stunningly, even Itachi to some extent. And in being faced with these worsening circumstances, Itachi unleashes some monstrous attack. Sasuke's chakra fades weaker and weaker until Orochimaru erupts forth from the depths of his person, forced to relinquish the very humanity that made him who he was. Despite him not necessarily being in control of this move, he did make the choice to imbue himself with Orochimaru's spirit in the first place, all with hatred driving him as a motivator. I don't think it's a coincidence that sandwiched between this pursuit of Itachi and this fated battle between brothers is a tale effectively describing the life and virtue of a mentor that consistently tried to do the right thing in the face of constant failure, who found solace and significance not in the goals he achieved, but the desire he consistently and earnestly expressed in doing his best, who told children who had endured so much pain in their lives to use it not as a vehicle for more suffering, but to use it as a motivator to emphasize and to prevent that suffering for others. Throughout these arcs, Sasuke, having known what it's like to lose those important to him, has carried with him a dedication to not take a life if he can help it, because he, more than perhaps anyone else he knows, understands what sort of impact
He
and
knows,
sense
yeah,
of sorrow that can bring
how much it
to his
hurts.
family. And he didn't want that for others. However, now, in this fight with Itachi, he's willing to throw all of that out the window. He's willing to let go of that side of himself if it means he gets what he wants. In other words, he too was embracing pain. And when Itachi takes out Orochimaru with relative ease, he starts to show very visible signs of serious injury and fatigue, coughing up blood, crying blood. The battle rages on until both are barely standing, Sasuke throwing everything he has at him until he too has nothing left, and staggering towards him in a bloody stupor is Itachi, extending his trembling hand to take what he considers his own, Sasuke's eyes. Later on in this arc, we get formally introduced to a character called Uchiha Madara. He takes Sasuke under his wing and in doing so fills him in on some key details concerning his now deceased brother. When Itachi was very young, through his exposure to pain and suffering in war, learned to be a gentle and peace-loving person, which again speaks to the Jiraiya teachings concerning pain and empathy for that pain once experienced. And in this description, Itachi is kind of the opposite of Madara in this situation. Where Madara killed his brother for the benefit of his own clan, Itachi sacrificed his own clan for the betterment of the wider community. With it being the case in the end, he cared more for his brother than the broader community of people even. In his dying moments, Itachi wasn't trying to get his eyes, he was trying to give him his ocular powers to protect him. And shortly following this revelation for Sasuke, Naruto starts to show up in the story once again. Having come to learn that his fraternal brother Sasuke had in fact achieved what he set out to do, in his last interaction with Itachi before he teleported to Sasuke's battle, Itachi presents Naruto a dilemma to contend with. Knowing what we do about Itachi's backstory, we can appreciate the clear connection being drawn between what choices he was left with and ultimately made when he was young. However, Naruto effectively responds by saying that when faced with a tough decision rife with compromise, he'd make both outcomes positive. He wouldn't kill Sasuke to save his village or vice versa. He'd save his village and he'd save Sasuke. There is no compromise with Naruto. For him, a life where he has to compromise isn't a life he thinks is worth living. So he'd rather die trying to get that perfect outcome rather than live with a compromise hanging over him for the rest of his life. And I think in a sort of childish, idealistic sort of way, there's a purity and sweetness to that sentiment that's just quite refreshing. And I think Itachi thought so too. I think this is a really important quote towards the end of the story. And someday, when you have the same eyes as I, you will find me again. I think this line is my favorite from all of the reflection panels we receive from Sasuke because, to be honest, in the moment I never took notice of that phrasing of the sentence. But knowing what I know now, it's clear to me that he meant if Sasuke can learn to understand his decisions and empathize to see the world as he saw it, that he will be able to see him as his brother once more. A lesson that, while incredibly simple, offers Sasuke the means with which to look at the world the very same way. The fight itself was amazing. The story surrounding it was incredible, and I really enjoyed reading it. And there's some stuff regarding Naruto's training and Cypher sent by Jiraiya that I just didn't have the time to get into this week, but I will definitely touch on it in the beginning of the next part. With that said, I really do hope that you enjoyed this video. It was really difficult to make as I had to make a separate second video this week addressing the whole Toei situation. But I'm still really happy to be getting back to Naruto, and I honestly can't wait to see where the story takes us next. If you enjoy videos like these Naruto videos, or maybe you want to see my suffering or joy as I review all of the Batman movies from the last 60 years, be sure to subscribe. It costs nothing, means the world to me and my team, and you can always unsubscribe later if you want. But that'll do for this week. I've been Totally Not Mark, and thank you all so much for watching.
Okay, so yeah, that's the video, and yeah, I mean, look, you already said everything in this video, but just how well done both these fights were. And of course, he talked about the Sasuke versus Deidara fight, which again, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated fights in the entire series, considering how well it was done. I'm not gonna lie, I am a little disappointed that he didn't talk about like Sasuke's, you know, his reaction to Madara's or technically Obito's his words and his explanation. I kind of wish he would have gone more into that, but I do understand what he said. The video was kind of already long enough, and he probably didn't have time to get into all of that, so he kind of had to like skim through it. And but I would have liked to hear his thoughts on, you know, Sasuke's reaction to the Itachi's revelation and his decision to, instead of honoring Itachi's wishes, he instead decided to go on and just destroy the village. But anyway, it's whatever. But who knows? Maybe he'll cover it in another video. Maybe when he gets to the 5 Kage arc. But with that being said, guys, I really hope you enjoyed the video. Please remember to leave a like, share this video out there, hit the subscribe button if you're new, click the bell icon to be notified whenever I post a video, and let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, as well as any recommendations you have for reactions. Just let me know about them there and I'll get to them. And with all that out of the way, I hope you guys will join me soon for my next video. Bye for now.